One thing I realized, I'm going to be reading a work in progress. It's a short story, and the working title, and I'm really open to title suggestions from everyone, but the working title is Dreamers. And I thought that was really actually interesting because it's like Dreamers the Sex Shop, which this used to be Dreamers the Sex Shop, and now it's Malvern Books, so it's pretty cool. I also have to apologize because I'm just stopping at this point in the story that's going to be in my mind kind of excruciatingly sad. So hopefully Gregory can turn the party up. All right, here we go. A few months after we started dating, we made a plan in the event of the apocalypse. If there was an explosion or bomb or meteor coming for us, we'd meet at the 24-hour Dreamers on the highway's access road north of town. I soon realized that despite Daniel's good intentions, he'd never make it. Something always got in his way of completing a task, getting a job, being anywhere on time. Those days, he could never remember which way to turn at the end of his own street. I knew he'd want to find me, but I didn't think he actually would. The cell towers would be down, the traffic unconquerable. I would be there because I'd find a way to be there. I'd walk the miles with my dog, I'd ride my bike, I'd run most likely. That was the one difference between us. I would run, he wouldn't be able to find his shoes. If it can happen in Iraq, why not here, I said one morning. It was the day after 4 car bombs detonated in Baghdad, killing hundreds, and we sat, strung out and tired, drinking coffee on my front porch. My dog ran around eating sticks and gnawing on the petrified frogs that died in the drought that summer. The entire yard was dirt, the tree limbs fell all the time, hitting cars or just landing on empty curbs. A bomb, a city under siege, it's always happening to someone else. It's not going to happen here, Daniel said, but what if it does? I pulled on the belt loop of his pants so he'd look at me. Anyway, you made the same claim about your car before it got repossessed. I told you, he said, that wasn't my fault. This won't be your fault either. That's when we devised the plan. Daniel laughed and said I didn't seem like the sex shop type, but I argued that Dreamers was easily accessible and right between our houses on the highway. When people think they're going to die, they get desperate, I said. It won't be closed. It's a goldmine opportunity. Daniel and I met 3 months after my sister died. She was younger than me and had been battling a heroin addiction. My parents were addicted to their pain. They couldn't see anything else. I started drinking all the time, took a few club drugs a few too many times, taught at a high school hungover, and spent my conference periods sleeping on my desk. It was the kind of school where most kids grew up in single-parent households. There were riots there, the black kids versus the Mexicans, the white kids versus the black kids. We were on lockdown every other month. I had moved to a new city in a new state, was driving different streets under a different sky, one that seemed to come alive only at night, under that dark, pulsing heat. I didn't understand it. Everything, everywhere, felt altogether sad. Daniel and I made rules for cocaine. It was only for weekends, but not every weekend. We wouldn't have a dealer, which meant we could only do it with friends. But when we went to a bar and our gums started itching, when our entire insides ached for it, we called those friends. We called them all the time. We pretended it was not a big deal, like we didn't need it. And then one of our friends would break and start texting, and we'd meet in a crowded alley around the corner. Marcus pushed for it tonight, I think. The next time it would be Daniel or Aubrey. I became comfortable telling myself that I was okay, that it was never me. When Daniel and I first met, there were no rules. We'd go to a show or a bar downtown, and then to an after party at someone's house, and without saying anything, Daniel would disappear with a group of people into a bathroom and leave me behind. One night, a few weeks into our relationship, I got mad, and he said, "I thought you didn't do blow." And I said, "I don't do it a lot, but it's rude that you go and don't even think to ask if I want to come." But what I really meant was that I didn't want to be alone and that I had never done blow at all. The next weekend, he brought me with him, and I snorted it for the first time and pretended I was a seasoned user. When I pulled the rolled bill from my nose, I felt nothing, and the instant after, my body was lightning, illuminated, and I shined. Let me tell you about this one time, I said, chewing on the insides of my face, grinding my teeth. Let me tell you something about my sister. He looked at me and said, "You never talk about your sister." Then I told him about how we used to walk through the woods and fish for minnows in the creek with lines and hooks attached to tree branches, and about how when we were teenagers, I gave her alcohol for the first time, and I described the way her face turned pink, how she lit up like she'd been thirsty for it all those years. I became capable of talking about her and told the stories that made me miss her and the ones that made me ashamed, and I could do it and feel close and keep drinking and not cry. As a child, I believed I could enter the television through the back and be on Sesame Street, or that if I broke the glass, I could climb inside and the whole world would open, that Ernie would invite me to parties, and that Big Bird would let me ride on his androgynous back. I thought that if I crawled into Swiss Family Robinson, I'd live in the treehouse amongst the gentle monkeys and ride a zebra in an animal race. When I got older, I imagined living in wars in other countries, huddled in beds as bombs fell and buildings crumbled. I imagined those wars coming to us. I knew I couldn't enter through glass, but I understood that death was everywhere, that conjuring the dead was almost impossible, that no matter how hard we tried, memory faded, that the world changed without any warning. I could never catch up. I hadn't seen any of Ingmar Bergman's films before he died, or the majority of the 80s comedies that served as cultural reference points in all of my friends' jokes, and full decades of music, the pop songs, the Billboard hits, the indie anthems. Even decades I'd been alive for totally escaped me. The things I learned in my childhood didn't apply. I no longer needed to know how to spot a sturdy landing rock when leaping across a creek, or how to properly arrange cutlery on a dinner table, or how to be like my parents and pretend that it was just a phase and that my sister wasn't actually an addict. The city at night moved like a river. Streets closed to cars and people rumbled through, filling the lanes, spilling over to the sidewalks, walking in the destination their currents pulled them. Daniel and I would weave through the mayhem, the high school kids and their boom boxes, the pedicab drivers and their jorts, the shirtless frat boys in bow ties, the corner buskers strumming ukuleles and old guitars, bouncers in their black shirts yelling $2 shots at anyone who looked drunk or high or lonely. I sometimes saw my students wandering those streets, wanting to be a part of that wild, brimming scene, posing for pictures with their friends, eating falafel, lugging around giant soda bottles of something other than soda. There's no arc to this part of the story. This was my life. I taught during the week and I drank at neighborhood bars at night. On Friday and Saturday, I drove downtown. It was always the same. We did cocaine, we met up with friends, we drank tequila and beer, and bought each other shots of whiskey. We went to Mohawk and Emos and Club DeVille. Daniel knew the bouncers and we got into all the venues for free. We picked friends up along the way, ones who hadn't thrown down for the 8-ball, and headed to the next spot. After last call, we crossed underneath the highway and went to an after-hours party house where a $5 entry fee bought all the NGDs you could drink, and we'd lose our friends and sneak behind the building to finish the bag. We did this and we had fun. We'd go home and sit on my porch and smoke cigarettes and keep drinking. And then one day, I still wanted to get high, but I didn't think it was fun anymore. On a Saturday night in May, my head started racing. My face throbbed and turned white, and my whole body broke into a desperate sweat. The highway's brake lights flashed and blurred together, flashed and flashed again. My head felt like a sandbag. I put it on Daniel's arm. "I think I'm having a heart attack," I said. He looked over and touched my forehead with his hands. I don't know what he was assessing. "You're okay," he said. You're going to be fine." He put his hands on my shoulders and directed me to a stoop at the far end of the lot. "Lean over, rest your head between your legs, just breathe." I didn't have the energy to ask him why or tell him to call an ambulance. The blur of the city drunk tank buzzed behind him, then turned down a street and disappeared. The line to get into the party lapped around the corner, and I thought the people looked like fake people. "I think I need a puke," I said, and Daniel made a motion that made me think he was going to try and help. "Don't follow me." I didn't want him to see me like that. I stumbled away towards the narrow path behind the building where a couple of guys in ironic neon pants pushed past me. I leaned my body against the brick wall and pulled my own hair back until it was done. "You look better. Do you feel better?" Daniel said when I returned. I felt a little better, but not that much better. "Let's never do drugs again," I said, and he nodded. When we got home, he tucked me in and brought me a glass of water and an aspirin. "Really," I said, "I'm done. Let's never do it again." I waited for Daniel to agree with me, to be on my team, but he just sat in the dim light on the edge of the comforter. His finger tapped absently against his knee, and he looked at the wall. I can't tell myself I can't do anything ever again. It makes me want it more. Does that make sense? But not for now. Not for now, I can get behind. When I was in college, I took an art theory class. When I was in college, the Twin Towers fell. I was in my dorm room on my way to a job interview at the campus rec center. Right before I walked out the door, the first building went down, and then I skipped the interview and the rest of my classes. The next week, in art theory, we talked about art versus beauty. Our professor quoted Aristotle, said, "Art is the right making of the thing to be made." The Twin Towers, he said, if you can separate yourself from the horribleness of the event, when they fell down in cascading plumes of smoke and ash, it looked quite beautiful. For a long time, I agreed in some fucked up and essential way. It was like how we rubberneck at an accident site on the side of the highway and find ourselves drawn to the beauty of the crushed metal, splintered glass, and ambulance lights, amazed by how much a body can and can't endure.